to the Middle East. It's very good.
Oké, hallo. Welkom by my. My naam is John Patrick Kennedy. Vergewe my asseblief die Ierse herkoms, maar ek open juis hier in Afrikaans om my egheid te toon. My oupa Grietjie, so my pa se oupa, het gekom uit Ierland uit en onmiddellik die Afrikanerdom aangeneem. Egter, on my mother's side, I am Maritz, as in the great Voortrekker leader Gerrit Maritz was my great-great-great-great-grandfather. This is in fact his bullet maker from the Groot Trek. Otherwise, my great-grandfather was Generaal Maritz, the writer of this book, My Lewe en Strewe, and the general in the Second Boer War and subsequent Maritz Rebellion. We are on Wikipedia, and we in fact lost our land to Reappropriation Act. Andersins is ek self 30 jaar oud en ek het 'n 5-jarige dogter en 'n tweede een op pad. Ek lewe al my lewe lank in Suid-Afrika en het op een stadium of 'n ander gebly in elk van die volgende. Van Johannesburg, waar ek tans is en gebore was, Witrifuur, which is near Mbombela, Pretoria, Makanda, and Mahikeng. I raise these points to start the discussion by saying I am a qualified speaker by sheer cultural heritage and current context. But I also want to make the very critical point that anybody who is inputting into this discussion or on this topic is not going to be objective. Unfortunately, this does include me. But if you could give me 15 minutes of your time, I promise that I will change your perspective on South Africa, my land, my heart, and on the Afrikaner, my volk, my gees. I promise to do my absolute best in keeping my facts objective, but also to raise them emotively, to produce you something exciting, but also hopefully a little bit inciting too. Okay, so what are we doing? First, we'll have a look at Trump and the global geopolitics of our contemporary time. Then we'll look at South Africa and how she finds her place in it. Then we'll discuss the local context and last week's debate, as well as the actual racist realities that we do face in our current political sphere. But perhaps not featuring a genocide. Okay, ek wil ook dan net noem dat ek het eintlik beplan om hierdie tipe kanaal af te skop oor so 2 wat maande, maar die debat laasweek het my te moede gemaak. So, pinch of salt and some grace. I'm not ready, but I hope you are. Let's do it. Let's start with where the current publicity is coming from. So, Mr. Donald Trump. Now, I am not a Trump fan. I do not like him, and at the first hearing that he's running for president back in 2016, I thought it was a joke. That said, you can only hate Ronaldo so much before you have to start admitting that it's not Ronaldo you hate, but football. If you have respect for the game, you have respect for Ronaldo. And so too, Trump is a master politician, and he really has been doing some fantastic work since he's been sworn in. From an American perspective, of course. Now, I would genuinely be proud of him if I wasn't playing for Team South Africa myself. That's it. Now, while I still have your attention, can I grab a quick moment from our sponsors, or at least who we're sponsoring? Letterkundig is a language initiative that we're trying to launch and get out of the developmental phase, but we need your help. So we're aiming to provide high quality foundation phase education in multiple South African languages within the next 3 to 5 years. Starting with Afrikaans and expanding into Zulu, Xhosa, Setswana, and Sesotho by the end of year 5, please consider backing our Kickstarter or contributing through Patreon. The links will be in the description below and maybe somewhere around here. I don't know what I'm doing yet, but can we get Natalie?
Is Natalie here? Somebody here to turn that? I
gotta give you one of those. Please, this is real help that can make a real difference. Instead of having divisive chats about this topic, let's change things in our South Africa. Thank you. Trump is engaged in a Cold War with China, and I personally believe it has a lot of potential to escalate into the Third World War within the next 5 to 10 years, if it's not handled correctly. he was sworn into no shortage of global problems. We're talking a gangrenous Ukraine, dollar eyesore. Of course, the Middle East and Israel. We're talking China and Taiwan. Even talk about BRICS and the currencies that are going up and down. Consider China and the peaking power problem. China's economy has had a rapid dash up to this point, but it looks to be fading at this stage. Trump knows that it's now or never for China, and he's hoping for never. The strategy is remind the world why the US is the US, and shake up the dollar economy. Only more than twice is it playing with yourself. Isolate and undermine the hell out of China, and drive a wedge into every single opposing alliance, across the board. So we've seen this in his shifting his stance in Ukraine. He seems to be systematically decoupling himself from Netanyahu at the moment. And he's in fact been surprisingly productive in the Middle East with Iran, the Houthis, and Qatar, if you count under the table bribes. Now Europe is crippling, but they're crippling on their own, all independently. Trump's gained valuable rare earth minerals in his deals with Ukraine there, and relieved a lot of concern on the Western front. A concern again spoken from a Western perspective. There is some genius at work here, and I'll call it that. He withdraws decades of aid money, most impacting, of course, those third worldly, noisy BRICS joiners, while introducing simultaneously global tariffs. He then takes those tariffs away on everybody except doubling down on China. So here's where it gets interesting. The disruption of the world economy has left developing countries and commodity export-driven economies like South Africa's in the deep water. We're in trouble. And right now, honestly, China does not have the capacity to make any nice or formidable uplifting economic shackle deals to live up to the promise BRICS showed just a year ago. Speaking of, do you note how much quieter the news and the momentum is regarding BRICS compared to just a year ago? That silence is Trump's success speaking volumes. He turns off the lights, and the US appears a beacon of light in a dark world, a world for us to follow.
Turn the lights down. Turn the lights down.
En actually net ook om te noem, daar is wat wel kan seker ook maar. Ek dink hulle moet maak soos 'n olifantpiel en val in die pad. As gies. Maar ek bly. See, we Africans might not be able to afford seeing the world through your lenses, but we do see pretty clearly ourselves. For the past 30 years, America has focused on soft power, where China has been taking more of a hard power approach, making transactional deals, building power plants, electricity grids, bridges, roads, railways. They've become Africa's largest trading partner, and an unfortunate proof is in the pudding. If you would ask 10 South Africans, 3 out of those 10 would tell you that China's better than America and they like it more. And a further 3 would say, you know, not even comparing to China, we don't like the US. And I say that we, but I'm quite neutral here. I want my butter on both sides. But that's an alarming stat. That means more than half of our country is not really aligned with the US in any way. So they need to start doing something. And Trump's administration does seem to understand this. We're not yet mentioning the concentration of platinum reserves, about 80% of the world's supplies in South Africa, which creates a critical supply chain dependency from many US-American industries. And that's why they list platinum as part of their resource list in critical strategies or strategic planning. Trump's administration also further realizes that 70% of the world's manganese is in South Africa, and about 70% of the world's chromium is in South Africa. Both of these are essential for the production of stainless and aerospace steel, the kind of steel you need with a war with the East or with the West. So South Africa is at the southern tip of Africa. Right about where Cape Town would be, at the bottom there, you would see the South Atlantic Corridor. So this is one of the world's main trading routes between the East and the West, especially now that the Suez Canal has come under constant pressure with the Houthis. most global trade between East and West has to move through either the Suez Canal or they have to go around South Africa. Our country's depressing failure to not be a global powerhouse aside, control or influence over the South Atlantic corridor means a very big power projection for an ally as well. So the reality is South Africa becomes a very important cog in the US-China respective ambitions. And we're right in the middle of that geopolitical cash cow. So South Africa's racial divisions began right about the time the Dutch arrived in the 1600s. And more fervently it followed when the British took over in 1795. Early colonial policies dispossessed the local Khoisan and San people, and they forced the Afrikaans Voortrekkers inland. Now it's worth noting right about this time that King Shaka Zulu also made waves and kind of shattered black South Africa. So there was this sense of a free-for-all. I'm not going to go into this topic. This is one in itself. But skipping over. The discovery of diamonds in 1867 and gold in 1886, of course, transformed the economy to exploit cheap black labor. And England finally took over all of us by the 1900s, the early 1900s. 1913, the Natives Land Act legally restricted black land ownership to literally about 13% of the country, forcing millions into labor migration into mines and white farms. Note that we're already getting to white and power tensions here over land and wealth distribution, but also note England. These colonial laws created the foundation for systemic racial inequality and economic exclusion, concentrating much of any process or valuable land or resources in the hands of the whites. Now, a lot of tit for tat followed and South Africa became independent in itself. And right about when Verwoerd beats Jan Smuts in 1948, it's just downhill completely from there. So it's not that Jan Smuts wasn't a racist. Unfortunately, we do have to take context into mind. He was a brilliant man, but the Afrikaners of the time were quite racist. He didn't believe in the pragmatics of Thuislande and segregation because it's illogical. Whereas Verwoerd and the National Party were keen and they proceeded. Laws like the Groups Act forcibly removed black communities from valuable urban and agricultural areas. This included areas like Johannesburg, actually. And Bantu education deliberately provided inferior schooling to kind of keep black children and limit them to manual labor. And this was done through not providing mother tongue education, by the way. The migrant labor system, homelands policies, and job reservation laws systematically excluded non-whites from all skilled occupations, from business ownership, from land accumulation. And by 1994, this had led to an extremely disproportionate concentration of wealth in our country. By 1994, we're talking 90% of all economic assets being in the hands of about 10% white minority rule. So the ANC inherited a structured economy that bases itself around racial inequality, with black South Africans lacking capital, skills, networks, property ownership or experience thereof. Despite political liberation, the economic legacy proved much harder to transform. Apartheid spatial planning still concentrates black South Africans to poorly located townships far from any economic opportunity. Inferior education systems still breed lack of skills development. Today, wealth remains in the concentrated 10%. It's not essentially white anymore, but it's still the same people who benefited from either apartheid or the reforms that came thereafter, not the people themselves. Finally, we get onto the point. Plaasmoorde. Farm murders are nothing new, and they've been occurring basically since the 1700s. The issue became heavily politicized during apartheid because they incentivized farmers, white farmers, to go and act as a buffer zone and act as surveillance and allow military bases to be built on their lands. This made farms a big target by the ANC and the PAC political movements of the time. Especially the PAC's military wing explicitly targeted white farms and white farmers as part of this military strategy. Now, the apartheid government and then later pro-Afrikaner groups in turn weaponized this fear and the attacks to promote the idea of a white genocide, to instigate fear in the white population vir 'n nag van die lang messe tipe van ding. The black political movements continued and still continue to at times sing protest songs like Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer, and that's been creating this perpetual tennis match that's been going on for long more than the last 30 years. Now, farm attacks have generally increased in the last 30 years, but there is somewhat of an ebb and flow. And it is mostly aligned with South Africa's other violent crimes in terms of number of statistics rising and falling. The violent crimes against people on farms and working on farms share many similarities with the trio of crimes. That is basically house robbery and home invasion, business robbery and carjacking. In our country, these are treated as separate priority crimes, and the police have set up task teams that specialize in investigating and addressing these trio crimes. Part of the problem in researching the rural crime in South Africa is of a definitional nature also. Is how do we define a farm? I mean, in land, in output. How do we define a farmer on the land? When do we report it in terms of a house burglary versus a farm attack? And what are we discussing here when we discuss hate crimes? Now, despite the inflammatory political rhetoric surrounding farm murders recently, primarily I would say that it might be more a criminal consequence at this moment than a racial or a politically motivated crime. In 2022, and this is not to diminish the importance at all, but in 2022 there were only 41 murders reported, or farm murders specifically. In the same year, 27,272 murders were reported across South Africa. Now, most attacks are committed by young men aged 20 to 27 from poor local communities, motivated by greed and pragmatic opportunity more than ideology. Targeting isolated farms based on access and opportunity. It's not so much the race. But when it does occur that a white Boer is killed on a farm, there is a fundamental jump in the grotesque brutality of the violence. I don't know how to express this apart from getting very real. So I myself have been involved in 5 violent crime encounters in my young life. Directly, I mean. I have been stabbed on my way to university. I have had to fight off to the near death a person on my way to a friend's house. Friends of mine and their family have been shot in home invasions. Our own home has been invaded, I think, about 8 times. That said, I still can't conceive of the level of violence that occurs in farm murders. It's not normal, and unfortunately, one has to admit it is hateful when it occurs. These specific crimes are truly grotesque. I mean, being tied up at 70 to watch your partner be raped. I mean, arriving on scene and seeing the bloody footprints of an infant daughter walking through her own father's blood to be executed outside. I mean, eyes being gouged out and melted plastic and boiling oil thrown on you. I mean being burned to death. These aren't normal violent crimes. Fuck julle. In her 2013 paper, Leanne Fuji proposes the concept of extra-lethal violence, which explores the way in which actors use violence above and beyond to achieve certain group initiative goals. We see this basically happening in a lot or all of terrorist activity. And an extension of Fuji's work on extra-lethality focused on the rural violence in South Africa and the brutality of extra-lethal violence that we see, that I just described. And she considers the possibility for how it's used as an opportunity to mobilize not only the perpetrating populations, but also the victim populations. Regardless of the size or the frequency of the acting or the incidents happening, the sheer grotesque violence motivates what we're seeing now here. Why this is an important message. It's not genocide, no. But it definitely is hate crime and we need to do something about it. So here's my suggestion of what I believe we ask for. We ask that it be treated like the trio of crimes and have its own. Farm murders and farm attacks should be treated as separate, prioritized crime categories. There should be a dedicated strategy for farm attacks and farm murders that target the criminal groups responsible, similar to how the trio of crimes are managed. The strategy should be used to protect farming communities, all people on the farms and the smallholding, and effectively track down and prosecute perpetrators more effectively. Ramaphosa and ruling parties should crack down on hate speeches and especially penalize its use at political rallies. We should weed out the garden and we should appoint experienced and skilled people of the utmost integrity into law enforcement, into legal prosecution, and into intelligence agencies. This isn't the case right now. BEE has led to widespread fronting, and it's also forced superficial compliance. It's forced brain drain and skilled professionals leaving our country. That's part of the discussion we're having today. Most of the time they're benefiting higher ups in political spheres, not the people, not the companies, not the economy, and not the landowners. They're not having a good time either. The economic impact of this cannot be more negative on South Africans, all of us. BEE compliance costs and the uncertainty regarding policies like this deter international investors, while they fail to meaningfully reduce any inequality. Collapsed agricultural productivity and failed land reforms threaten food security. And politically and socially, these policies have increased racial tension, not solved them. So we've created unrealistic expectations. We've got a very poor economic performance that's limited resources for any genuine transformation. Well, we just keep bickering on about white, black, but it's a socio-economic inequality that we need to address, not the color of our skins. So the core problem is that both policies prioritize racial demographics over capability, over sustainable development, over unity of a people. Who are the intended beneficiaries? Trump won the debate. As I said, he does this through such fine and meticulous political interplay. As a fan of politics, I really do enjoy watching it. Ramaphosa was much too diplomatic, I'd say. Though, to be fair, he raised some good points. I'm going to try and maybe rephrase them soon. So, Trump completely handled Ramaphosa, and that's not an easy thing to do. Bear in mind, this man is highly intelligent. As Trump said, he actually is well respected.
Certainly in some circles, really respected. Other circles, a little bit less respected, like all of us in all fairness.
And he's a self-made millionaire who was part of the ANC leadership from the apartheid era. He's not a pushover, but got pushed over. They both claim that they were there to reset the relationship, and I think that is exactly what's happening. In a lot of the discussion we've had so far, I think let's just skip through a couple of clips.
He called, I don't know where he got my number, but I picked up. He said, I want to come over and see you. And that was my honor, and thank you very much for being here.
You're most welcome. Most welcome. Well, thank you very much for need to reset that, particularly in the light of some of the announcements that you made on trade. And we also want to discuss issues that have to do with how we promote further investments in both countries.
Any questions, please?
Mr. President, we welcome white Afrikaner refugees here. Can you explain to Americans why it's appropriate to welcome white Afrikaners here when other refugees like Afghans, Venezuelans, Haitians have all had their protected status revoked?
Well, this is a group, NBC, that is truly fake news.
Notice here how Trump gets asked the question of why Afrikaners and no other refugees, and he skillfully dodges the question and then as diplomatically as possible basically explains because they're white.
We've had tremendous complaints about Africa, about other countries too, from people. They say there's a lot of bad things going on in Africa, and when you say we don't take others, all you have to do is take a look at the southern border. We let 21 million people come through our border. They came from all over the world. In many cases, they're criminals. They come from prisons. They come from mental institutions. They come from street gangs. They're drug dealers. So don't say that we didn't take them. We're trying to get them out as fast as we can. If we feel there's persecution or genocide going on. And just put this on, it's right behind you. Johan.
There's nothing this parliament can do. With or without you, people are going to occupy land. We require no permission from you, from the president, from no one.
And here's the slam dunk from Trump. Ramaphosa was smashed into a corner with Julius Malema in a Joe Rogan style clip called up.
Go after a white man. There will be a terrible pain because you have touched a white man. Kill the poor, the farmer. Kill the poor, the farmer. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I'm saying to you,
Quite honestly, if I were Cyril Ramaphosa, I'd probably counter this point just by asking for Natalie to put up a clip of a certain January on Capitol Hill, or the KKK, or the RFK. Isn't that your family? Ja, ek sê vir hom stil te wees. Waar het gaan? Is 2 minute en nog maar 1 minuut. Second, I would make the point that the KKKs and the RFKs don't represent white American views. Now, do they? But secondary, that the KKKs and the RFKs don't speak for white America. Now, do they? And so too, Julius Malema definitely does not speak. He has never had in his whole time, he's never had more than a 7-8% support in our democratic country. Now, as I said, that he does need penalizing. That could have been done better, and Trump is perhaps correct there. But yeah, the brutal truth is that farm murders and crushing inequality are severe and very real South African problems. And that's kind of what motivated me to make this video, is we need to correct some of the facts and make it clear, but there are a lot of big concerning issues that the attention can help a lot with, that direct help can help a lot with. But get involved and stay involved, because watch this space. I think a lot's coming in the next 5 years. It is deeply unfortunate that these problems run across racial tension lines, but we're fighting the wrong war. These aren't racial battles, or at least they shouldn't be anymore. They are hatefully desperate symptoms of a socio-economic crisis, of a dream that's looking a bit frail at the moment. It's strangling all of us. When young men from impoverished communities resort to violence because they see no other path to survival, when racial quotas are prioritized over the economy and the well-being of our community, we're not addressing any racial tensions, we're creating much more. En ons skep 'n volk wat dan vervreemd en verwyd voel en wat dan wil gaan Amerika toe, maar ons moet nie fok of tussen die ou daar nie, die is nou ons land. The South African people are beautiful, and Afrikaans, the Afrikaans language itself tells the story if we choose to listen. If you look at it, Afrikaans is spoken by 7 million people in South Africa. 60% of those, and so no, I don't mean Afrikaners, I mean speakers of Afrikaans, but how many languages do you speak? 60% of those speakers are not white, are non-whites. And I mean, we took so much from the indigenous languages in making our language, from Cape Malay to French as well, to Xhosa and Sesotho and Zulu words, Khoisan words. We are Afrikaans, Afrikaans. Afrikaners aren't all farmers. Farmers aren't all white. Afrikaans speakers represent one of the most diverse and beautiful language diversities, linguistic communities that we have in the melting pot of the world. Ek glo in my volk as die enigste wit Afrika stam in 'n groter plan. Ek glo dit vuur en vlam. Maar ons kort hulp. So here's what real change looks like. Stop legislating inequality that breeds resentment, economic stagnation. Invest massively in education, mother tongue education. Letterkennis, here we go. Skills development, economic opportunities for all South Africans that choose to stay here, for all of us that holistically want to build this country together. Give acknowledgement to that as the patriotic goal, as opposed to who said what, when, where, and we can't do this all the time. Please, let's change. The choice is ours. Keep playing yesterday's games with the endless tennis dick swinging, or start adjusting the court of our opinion and frame a better tomorrow for all of us to live in. Thank you. Okay, now if you're still here, that means that, well, thank you very much for making it this far. I really do appreciate it. And thank you for hearing someone out as much as this. This has been my first video of the channel, and I was actually thinking to do something more along the lines of the history of South Africa across the whole year, to do 500 years, just proper in-depth narrative, basically, of everything that happened here, so that we can get that out there. Now, if you do like the content, do like and subscribe, please, and show some encouragement. Let me know in the comments what you would like to see. So I'm thinking now to maybe interlace that history thing with more current discussions like this. Thank you for the support. Please go check out Letterkundish and baie dankie. Ek sien julle weer binnekort hopelik. Ook hartlik, ek hoop nie ek het enigiemand seer gemaak in die maak van hierdie video nie. Dit is 'n baie sensitiewe onderwerp. En dis 'n moeilike lyn om te hardloop. So ek onderspeel niks nie. Ek hoop ek het 'n balans. Ek hoop ek het 'n balans getref op die ou en hiervan, en ek hoop meer as enigiets dat elke Afrikaner met my sal saamstem, en waar jy nie doen nie, laat my weet. En dan praat ons daaroor, want ons moet saamstem. Dis tyd.